Hello, Matey Thrive Nation. This is my first hydrogen podcast and the importance of hydrogen. And I've got an expert in the field. He's an author, inventor. He's peer-reviewed many articles and written. And so it's really a pleasure and a privilege to have Alex Tarnava on the show. And we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of how important and why hydrogen should be part of your arsenal as an optimizer. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Let's get into your backstory quickly because I think that'll just reel people in. And then maybe what you can do is just speak into the archetype that has really improved their health and their wellness with hydrogen.
Yeah. I found hydrogen about a decade ago, a little over a decade maybe. I was a amateur but competitive athlete at that time. I had a business that gave me a lot of freedom. So I was training 4 to 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. CrossFit, martial arts. My active recovery were things like hikes and going to do wind sprints at the track. And, it was my life. A big part of my life was just fitness and competition. And at 29 years old, I got absolutely rocked with a mystery virus. The mystery virus led to an autoimmune response. My C-reactive proteins went like 100 times abnormal to 34 milligrams a liter. So just in chronic devastating inflammation. It led to sudden onset narcolepsy. If I sat for a minute or two, I'd just fall asleep. I was sleeping 16, sometimes 18 hours a day. I was anemic despite at that time I was on a paleo diet. I was eating tons of red meat and, lots of like spinach and greeny vegetables, but I was somehow severely anemic. And I had central nervous system fatigue. So I couldn't jump an inch off the ground, couldn't do anything reactive. My strength was unaffected, but I had absolutely no explosive ability in my body. And the doctors were flabbergasted. They didn't know what was going on. It lasted a couple months. And when the dust settled, and by settled, I mean my CRP dropped to like 3 milligrams a liter, which is what you'd expect from a 65-year-old diabetic. They still call it the upper end of healthy and normal, but normal is not healthy in our society today. And especially not for a 29-year-old fit athlete should not have a CRP that high. But I basically, they told me to take 1,000 milligrams of naproxen a day. So kind of like 5 times the daily dose of Aleve, for instance, and quarterly cortisone injections. And I just knew that was not a forever solution. And I was pretty desperate at that time. So all the time I'd spent exercising, I was just reading PubMed, study after study, anything that could regulate the inflammatory response. I was just throwing everything against the wall to see what stuck. And, I knew enough about science to know that you should try one thing at a time, but desperation has a funny way of creating impatience that you just try everything at once and hope you find something and hope you get better. And one of the things I tried was a machine that purportedly made hydrogen water. And I found some studies on molecular hydrogen and hydrogen water and regulating the inflammatory response. But I'd gone down my merry way. I was doing dozens of different things, protocols, and was working out, not like I had before. And about 9 months after I started the naproxen, because I did need it to actually function. I couldn't put on shoes, couldn't put on a shirt, anything like that. I was so seized up. So I had developed osteoarthritis in 11 joints from this acute period of inflammation. It just, everywhere I had a past injury, it just shredded the cartilage. Like it was bad news. Well, anyways, after about 9 months, I fainted in the gym a few times.
Sure.
The naproxen had given me multiple ulcers. I wasn't processing my nutrients properly. So I had to abruptly stop. In stopping the naproxen, my joints froze almost immediately. And I realized that nothing I was doing other than the drugs that were destroying my stomach was actually helping modulate the inflammatory response or reduce it.
Yeah.
Um, I went back to the drawing board, started reading more studies, and I found a bunch of new ones on hydrogen and hydrogen water. And it kind of pissed me off because I had this $5,000 machine I'd bought that clearly wasn't doing anything. But it just dawned on me, well, hydrogen must be like any other molecule. What dose works, right? What dose am I getting,
Mm.
right? So I started buying the full papers to read the materials and methods to see how the researchers were making hydrogen water, and literally none of them were using a machine like I'd bought, and was reading the concentrations and the dosages. And so then I wanted to find out what I was getting and how it related to what the research showed. And so I found a reagent to test for the presence of hydrogen in an aqueous solution, and it was undetectable.
Sure.
And I had to triple the input to reduce a single drop. So it was like zero point zero 0.03 parts per million or milligrams a liter, a fraction, of the lowest ever observed amount of H2 to have any sort of physiological effect. And by physiological effect, that doesn't even mean it's going to have a therapeutic effect. It
Yeah.
just means it has an interaction, in our body. So like 1/30th the dose of getting a minimum in like anything physiological effect. So that actually gave me a bit of hope, and I started experimenting on how to make hydrogen water at home. There's some stories of me blowing up thermoses in my fridge, like from pressure buildup. But long story short, I had figured out ways to get up to about 3 parts per million or milligrams a liter of H2. And I was drinking several liters of it a day, and my joints loosened and I was feeling better. And throughout this journey, I had started compressing tablets because I was concerned, one, about how much magnesium I was getting. So most of the research at that time are either bubbling pure hydrogen gas through water for extended periods of time, often under pressure, or they were using elemental magnesium, right, to produce H2. Um, Magnesium rods were available, but then you can't measure how much magnesium you're getting. A lot of people in the natural community think more is always better of anything good for you. Uh, that is fallacious, obviously. With most vitamins and minerals and things good for us, if you get too much of it, it's just as bad or worse than if you are deficient in it. So I was worried about getting too much magnesium. I wanted to control my magnesium intake. So that's why I found powdered magnesium, which has all sorts of dangers and worries about it. It's basically in powdered grade. It's the white in fireworks. It burns at like, you know, 3,800 degrees Celsius or something like
Yeah.
that. It's crazy dangerous to handle, but also it floats. So it's not necessarily going to get down to the bottom of the water and properly saturate. So I need to control that. I started pressing into tablets, and by the time that happened, I'm like, okay, I feel better now, but I want to make sure that I'm not poisoning myself in some way that I don't understand,
Exactly.
right? I didn't want to be a victim of being at the wrong point on the Dunning-Kruger scale, or winning
Exactly.
a Darwin Award and poisoning myself or blowing up my kitchen dealing with
Yeah.
elemental magnesium and hydrogen gas. And
Or your
I
joints
found
got
my
or your joints got a lot better, but then you destroyed your liver or you destroyed your kidney. I mean, you got to
yeah,
look at it holistically, you know. So, and you weren't doing any other
exactly.
functional medicine techniques. You had tried everything. I'm assuming that you were at integrative practitioners. No one could help you. So you obviously
Yeah,
did your due diligence there, and you only found hydrogen was effective in helping unlock your joints.
yeah. So there were other things that worked. Like I was doing like say cryotherapy,
Yeah.
right, and going to like cold cold saunas. It would loosen my joints for a few hours, but I don't know what it is today, but back then a cryo sauna session was like $60,
Yeah.
and a headache to book and to book it every day
Yeah.
and then
Sure.
have it only work for a few hours. Um, I like cold plunging now. It's hard because I do take hydrogen. I find a lot of other benefits from cold plunging, but that could have been
Helps with
something
the
that would
feeling.
have helped me back in the day. It wasn't nearly as popular,
Mm.
10, 11 years ago as it is now. They weren't widely available. Um, and when I would do a cold plunge, it was literally going to the grocery store and buying bags of ice and putting it in my
Wow.
bathtub, which is
Yeah.
a headache and stuff like that. But nothing really was working like round the clock, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. There were things that were working for a couple hours, like cold plunging,
Yeah.
but nothing that was really turning the dial except H2.
Okay.
Um, so I found my founding partner, Dr. Holland, who is from the pharmaceutical industry. He's a chemist, organic chemist. He designs small molecules for various drug targets. And I just wanted to double check all my work and make sure that I wasn't producing some molecule that I wasn't aware of that, again, was going to destroy my liver, or my kidney,
Exactly.
or poison in some way. Um, and also wanted to make sure that what I was making was efficient and could be improved. At that time, I was just thinking, do it yourself. Like I just wanted to continue doing this for my own health. And at first, he told me it was the worst pseudoscience he'd ever heard in his life. Gave me all these reasons why hydrogen would have no therapeutic impact on the body, and even if it did, why you'd want to inhale it, not drink it. And by that time, I had read every single paper on hydrogen as a therapeutic agent to date. I was able to rebut every single one of his objections with peer-reviewed data. He came back surprised and said he's shocked, he's skeptical, but it appears there is some real science here. He'll take a look. Um, every day that went by, I just kept sending him like a new paper, with some commentary on it. I was really excited. Um, I've got light Asperger's. When I get obsessed about something, I want to share it with everyone in the world, and it's all I want to talk about. Um,
But I mean, at
and
this
just after,
time, your joints were a lot better. You were feeling a lot better. You're getting 3 ppms parts per million. You can cope. I mean, obviously there was damage to the joints, but basically
yeah,
now, and you didn't have a chemistry background. Basically, you got obsessed with this. You're trying to help yourself. Somehow you use YouTube, or you just use some way to understand the articles, or and then you get contacted, or you contact Dr. Holland, and this is sort of your journey. It's an incredible journey.
yeah. I'm a reader, so I'm not too visual or audio. So I just was reading the papers and going down rabbit holes and um, keeping kind of like, as I'd read one study, I'd try and understand an aspect of the study, and then I'd read other studies to understand what they were doing and why they designed a study like this. Yeah, best way to describe, I'm a reader. At times in my life, I've read 12, 14 hours a day, just nonstop. I don't have the concern anymore because with how many businesses I run, how many calls I'm on every day, trying to juggle that with like friends and family. It's impossible I don't see people, but there's been points in my life where I've gone weeks, sometimes even a couple months without really talking to a person outside of work a couple hours a day,
Sure.
just sitting and reading and in my thoughts like
Wow.
all day long. So I'm a little bizarre, unique like that, but it helped me in this regard. We tweaked the formula. I'd sent him a study on a certain disease model, a phase two double-blind placebo-controlled trial, which serendipitously was actually a disease he was developing small molecules for at his role at a pharmaceutical company. And he called me for lunch and said, with all the other papers, he had to just look at the methodology and conclusions and trust that it wasn't fraud. And with this one, he was actually a subject matter expert. And unless it was fraud, this stuff actually worked. And he wished the molecules he was developing worked this well. And he basically pitched me on commercializing that I shouldn't be thinking of this as a do-it-yourself project, that I should be developing this, right? Especially with the concentrations we were getting with the tablets I was making, which was blowing everything else, even back then, you know, that was commercially available. So we went down that road. It was a lot easier to perfect the tablet making 20 at a time in a mortar and pestle than making millions at high speed on a production line. Um, so it took something like 16 months and thousands of iterative adjustments, 15 failed scale up attempts, and finally I had a production ready tablet. And I'd had to step in to a role as sort of like a quarterback or a systems thinker. Is what really, and I'm actually writing a book on this. It's what we're desperately lacking in this world is systems thinkers that can bridge the gaps between multiple expertises and silos. I quickly learned that the manufacturers say their formulas like know a certain thing. The production manager knows a certain thing. I hired physicists. They look at it through a keyhole. The chemist looks at it through a keyhole. Everyone looks at it through a keyhole. And there's no one that was bridging the gap to put all the individual pieces and synthesizing it and to think about it as a holistic problem. Um, so also something we're desperately lacking in medicine, right? And how we look at the body holistically. And I'm actually there's another book I'm writing about this, and I'm writing a couple of papers for peer review about this. Uh, and we get into this false dichotomy argument of the evidence-based medicine crowd says, well, this is how we do things. That doesn't mean it's the best way to do them. Then the natural crowd says we have to look at things holistically, but they don't actually offer a solution about how we do that, right? They just criticize the other side. And it's just criticisms back and forth. And there's actually ways to do this using peer-reviewed evidence. We could return back to publishing standards, how it was before commercialization, before the late 1950s, for instance, where it was nonprofit societies of learned intellectuals in the field that didn't have financial ties like the privatized commercialized journal standard, which is actually terrifying that all the academic journals are basically owned by the same three managed investment firms as all the pharmaceutical companies, which own, 90 something percent of all the Fortune 500 companies too. So it's all intertwined, right? It gets a lot deeper, actually. If you look at the history, it's terrifying. But we could fix science in a lot of ways and look at the body holistically. And there's easy solutions. It's just neither side is actually talking about them for whatever reason, right? Maybe they're so ingrained into the black and white debate of you're stupid, you're evil,
Yeah.
back and forth, and not thinking about how we mend and find a methodology that actually works to accomplish our goals. Um,
So you
but
scaled the organization, you looked at the science, you managed to sort of bring the system thinking, and you were able to get to what concentration on your tablets?
So when we launched, we were in a sealed container. We were getting 3 to 4 milligrams a liter of parts per million. Soon after, I had gotten, so I already was aware by that time of this ability to make small nanobubbles, and I'd been observing it. I was trying to get it to work in formulation. Maybe a few months after launching, I was able to get it to work. We jumped up to being able to get about 9 milligrams a liter of parts per million. Today, we're getting over 12 milligrams a liter of parts per million. It's the same amount of magnesium. We're just getting more efficient. We're over 90% efficient now, so there's not much room for improvement. Um,
And is
so
that the
we've kind
open
of
cup or the closed system? Because here in South Africa, there's a closed system, but it takes so much work. There's so much PT
yeah,
involved, and it's too
it's
much.
yeah, it's an open cup. So basically, to get the same amount of H2 concentration in a closed system, you need about 130 psi of pressure in about 8 hours to hit an equilibrium. Right? There's big engineering challenges to that. So most closed system, like hydrogen generating machines and devices and such, typically peak at 2 to 3 parts per million. Some of them claim they get up to 5 or higher parts per million, but their seals start leaking shortly after. Think about the gaskets. It's like a table, right? Maybe your table is rated for 100 pounds. And if you drop a 100-pound weight on it, it holds it. But if you drop that 100-pound weight on it over and over, 4 times a day, day after day, all of a sudden in days or weeks or months, that table collapses because the blow over and over. Gaskets are the same. So maybe a gasket is rated for 50 or 60 psi, which is needed to get to the 4 or 5 parts per million. It's rated to do that once and to hold it, right? And
Yeah.
that's same if you just put a 100-pound weight on the table, it'll hold it indefinitely, forever. But if you drop it from an inch up
Mm.
over and over again, that's
Yeah.
when it breaks. And that's what kind of the pressure buildup does, right? You're going from no pressure to pressure, and it's like hitting it with a weight or a hammer. So eventually these systems break down. So my technology figured out a way to bypass that by making these very small nanobubbles that do not dissipate. They're resistant to coalescing. They do coalesce. You have to drink it fast, but you have a few minutes to chug it down. Ideally, the faster the better. But they're stable enough to drink it. And as soon as you drink it, it gets into your gut. And that gets us to the second point. A lot of people will say, oh, hydrogen water is better, or hydrogen inhalation is better, or bathing in hydrogen water is better. Well, all of them, or hydrogen saline, which they use in some hospitals, all of them have different distribution throughout the body, right? So it's not that one is better than the other. It's that various methods of
Yeah.
distribution
Exactly.
or the administration lead to different distribution throughout our tissue and organs. So each method of administration and the distribution that comes from it will result in higher or lower saturations in different
Tissues, different parts of the
tissues and
body.
areas
It's
of the
like
body.
ozone. Ozone, you can drink the ozone water, use it on your skin. You can get an infrared sauna. I inject it. I've been doing it for 15 years. Different modalities, rectal insufflation. You can run hydrogen peroxide through a drip to make sure you get the ozonide. So I got you. And I think
Yeah,
it's got to be very specific for the use and the goal that you want to actually
it,
achieve.
exactly. So hydrogen water, where it shines is it gets into the gut. It interacts with the microbiome. It interacts with certain hormones that have various effects, such as ghrelin, GLP-1. In regards to ghrelin, people think of ghrelin as a hunger hormone. That's a very, very narrow way to look at it. Ghrelin plays a lot of roles. It regulates, glucose homeostasis, insulin response. It's neuroprotective. So the benefits of hydrogen water largely come down to microbiome health, uh, and others regarding metabolism, metabolic health, which the gut plays a big role, and these hormones like GLP-1 and ghrelin. And don't think of it as like an agonist for GLP-1, like a drug like Ozempic, where hydrogen, what it's doing is sort of like a supervisor within our cells that's modulating responses back to homeostasis or proper function. So even with GLP-1, we have some really interesting research. We have a preclinical study showing that in induction of obesity in rodents, we're attenuating the rise in GLP-1. So GLP-1 actually does the same thing like insulin. Like our body over responds when we start becoming
Mm.
obese. With insulin, it jacks up high and then we don't make enough of it. GLP-1's the same. We try and overcompensate by driving it full throttle. And if you keep on pushing through, then you've kind of broken the system
Yeah.
and it doesn't work properly. So we attenuated that rise, but in attenuating the rise, we still modulated appetite, right? With
Mm.
the rodents, and they actually resisted obesity. But in a human clinical trial, which I was an author on, 8-week double-blind, placebo-controlled, um, and this was in chronically obese middle-aged people. So this is not new obesity. These are people who have been obese who have broken their system. We increased GLP-1, right? So we're restoring the ability
Mm.
to
Got you.
produce GLP after feeding. We also regulated, or we also improved like cholesterol, which we've done in many, many clinical trials, and there's systematic reviews and meta-analyses showing hydrogen has a modulatory role in improving cholesterol. We improve sleep. So there are some other factors as well. But that, along with some other research that we have, like we've modulated ghrelin, like in overweight people, we actually restored the peak of ghrelin during fasting. So actually, you see some interesting things in obese
Mm,
people that they never hit a spike in ghrelin when they're hungry, and it never
yeah.
falls to nothing after they eat. So it just kind of stays steady state. So they're always a little bit hungry.
Yeah.
So that's why
Gotcha.
they're snacking. They're not eating huge meals. They're just snacking all day long
Mm.
and eating too
Okay.
many calories.
Let's summarize because I think we've gone very technical, which is important because it's part of just your research. And that if you're listening out there and you've got a metabolic disorder, you're pre-diabetic, insulin resistance, possibly you're obese. One of the roles of hydrogen, you're listening there, is can it help the modulation of a GLP-1 agonist? And that's very, very important to allow it to rise and allow it to fall. So with that, I think in your case, let's just finish your story. The inflammatory response, the high CRP, C-reactive protein. Someone's listening out there and saying, "Oh, Alex, you obviously helped your joints. You got degeneration, helped the inflammation." Let's speak into sort of the avatar of joint health, and let's finish there. We'll go into the metabolic part, obviously through the gut, but how does it help joints?
So there is some research on hydrogen uh, potential ability to slow joint degradation, in induced osteoarthritis through um, WNTP-catenin signaling. But in my case, my left shoulder was too far gone. There
Yeah.
was really nothing hydrogen could do. This is as far as it goes. I have bone-on-bone arthritis with multiple labral tears. Basically, I got rear-ended shortly after the arthritis formed, which
Mm,
tore my labrum. And the
sure.
Canadian healthcare system, because I had arthritis, wouldn't fix the labral tears, so it just caused a loop of
Mhm.
degeneration between the two
Okay.
damaged parts. With the rest of my joints, um, I've seen almost no degeneration in the last decade.
Wow.
Um, they're getting a little bit worse. I kickbox 3 times a week. I lift weights a couple times a week. There's slight degeneration, but not what would be expected for having, say, moderate OA in a lot of these joints and
Mhm.
still pushing and exercising for 10, 11 years
So that's,
after.
I mean, that's incredible. And now you're saying this research, I've injected over 33,000 sessions of regenerative medicine, of platelet-rich plasma as a physician, as prolotherapy, ozone. You're saying you're drinking 2 liters of hydrogen water. I mean, what effect, what's the dose? And we talk about dose obviously being crucially important and parts per million. How much do you have to drink to get some type of joint effect?
I find, and this is going to be highly variable. For myself, I take about 4 to 6 tablets a day, in at least a few hundred milliliters per tablet. How you take it is very important too. So I have IP regarding stabilizing nanobubbles into gels and foams using polysaccharides, which kind of trap the H2 nanobubbles and create these gels and foams. You don't want to eat, basically, and then take your hydrogen. You want to take it on an empty stomach. You also want this pulsing effect. So how hydrogen is working, it's similar to a hormetic agent, such as exercise or cold or fasting or anything like that. But I would call it something more like an anticipatory hormetic agent. Um, Now, to understand this, we and hydrogen's role in the body, we have to go to the very beginning of evolution. For instance, our last universal common ancestor that spawned all life on this planet, it consumed hydrogen as a fuel source from volcanic vents, deep in the ocean. Our mitochondria came from eukaryotes, which formed from a bond. One of the organelles was expelling hydrogen as a waste product, right? So hydrogen has been with us for steps before the mitochondria. It got carried through us. We have evolved to produce hydrogen endogenously in our body. We do this by fermenting fiber, right? So we have bacteria in our body that we've carried through evolution that ferments non-nutritive carbohydrates and produces tremendous amounts of hydrogen gas. Now, the problem with this is throughout the majority of human evolution, we would have consumed 100 to 50 grams of dietary fiber a day. Today, the average person is consuming 10 to 15 grams of dietary fiber a day. But the average person on, say, a Western diet is consuming 0 to 3 grams of fiber
Yeah.
a day. Um, Bacteria is like any other living thing. If you don't feed it, it dies, right? And as the bacteria that produces hydrogen dies off, bad bacteria take its place, such as methanogens, which produce methane gas, which is a waste product. Now, methane is linked to basically all-cause mortality, basically every chronic disease. Um, we also know that in observational studies in centenarians in Okinawa, that these people who are over 100 have higher breath hydrogen than the average young person, even higher than their direct descendants who are younger. So that's lifestyle, right? They've kept the ability to produce hydrogen into their old age through their diet and their lifestyle. We have lost that in modern times. But we haven't just lost it because of these fast food diets, we've lost it over 10,000 years of horticulture. Now, through selective breeding of all our fruits and vegetables, we have stripped the fiber. It is virtually impossible to eat 100 to 150 grams of dietary fiber a day now. Raw food vegans don't hit those type of numbers, right? Because our food just does not have the fiber that it had before the agricultural
Mm.
revolution. We made our food easier to consume. That's also why we have bad teeth now, right? Because we used to gnaw at this fibrous food, which made our jaws stronger, which held our teeth in place. Which is why when you look at old skeletons, they're straight teeth. But we're at the anticipatory form. Now, this is just a hypothesis, but it makes a lot of sense to me, and I've been thinking about it a lot lately. Now, when would we have consumed the most hydrogen during our hunter-gatherer days? It would have been when we couldn't kill something, right? When we're starving to death, right? We haven't killed an animal, and so we are looking for any plant-based nutrition to consume as much of it as possible to stop from dying,
Yeah.
right? To stop starvation. Um, Now, you look at some interesting research as well. Um, when you give hydrogen to, say, Drosophila, right, fruit flies, and you starve them to death, the fruit flies that are given hydrogen live substantially longer, right? It modulates their response to the starvation. You look at humans and rodents, and when you give them hydrogen, it activates a lot of the same pathways as fasting caloric restriction or as exercise, which is why we call it a hormetic agent, because it's working like these other forms of hormesis. And we have identified that there's a very, very mild stress to the mitochondria as well that induces this. But the difference is with every hormetic agent, they operate on like a sharp J curve or reverse J, that you get a little bit and it's good. You get a moderate amount, maybe it's still good. You do too much and it's very harmful. It just becomes poison or stress or danger. Um, Hydrogen, we haven't found that. We haven't even plateaued in most regards, right? So the more we get, the better it seems to be working, which is why I go back to an anticipatory form of hormesis. When we get this large amount of hydrogen, it's almost as if our cells activate these modulatory stress responses, thinking we're about to starve to death or something, and our body goes into repair mode, as a trigger, a signal, that harm is coming. But of course, there is no harm coming. We're not about to starve to death. So we're just getting the benefits of the activations and the modulation
Like a
that our body goes
messenger,
into repair.
rather. I mean, if you look at
Yeah.
it, and which is different to an antioxidant, because I think that's what's also happening. People, if you're listening out there, taking way too many antioxidants,
And then
where,
they go into reductive stress.
yeah, exactly, where it doesn't seem that that happens with hydrogen.
Not at all. And one of the biggest misconceptions about hydrogen is that it is an antioxidant. Now, there are ways you can get H2 to work directly as an antioxidant in vivo, so in like a petri dish. You know, um, you can directly introduce it like the hydroxyl radical or peroxynitrite, and it forces a reaction. It likely does not happen in a living body, and if it does, it's so inconsequential that it's not going to do anything. How hydrogen actually works is in this very mild stress of the mitochondria and this basically anticipatory response, it activates the NRF2 pathway, which the NRF2 keep one pathway, and our body produces our own antioxidants like glutathione, superoxide dismutase, and catalyze. But it's also regulating beneficial stressors like nitric oxide and hydrogen peroxide. And basically, it's driving to something called the redox homeostasis, which is the harmony between oxidation and reduction. And of course, oxidative stress is bad. When it's chronic and out of equilibrium, out of homeostasis. But like you said, so is too much antioxidants. You go into something called reductive stress. All the longitudinal studies, the long-term studies with high dose antioxidants have either failed or been stopped dead because they found not only to not work, but in many cases to cause harm, right? To cause higher rates of cancer, all-cause mortality, right? Interfere with other therapies. It's not good. Our body needs harmony. It needs homeostasis.
Yeah.
Basically, everything in our body has a purpose. Even inflammation. People think inflammation is bad. Inflammation is part of our immune system.
Yeah.
We need inflammation to protect us.
Exactly.
It's just when it is chronically elevated or suppressed that it becomes a problem.
Okay, let's sort of summarize. So joint health, there's some studies. This is what you're doing, taking 6 to 8 tablets and 300 mils of water, all right, on a daily basis. We've spoken about metabolic health. Is that your sort of number one for hydrogen? Maybe you can just go through a list where you obviously been doing this for a while. So you must have testimonials. You must have people that have written to you, or you've distributed your product through other companies. Where are the sort of major benefits health wise from condition perspective?
So I'll defer to our clinical research. We get countless testimonials, right? And we'll use them for research direction to explore, but I always defer to, the double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. And sorry, I went on a long tangent. The best answer is we don't have perfect evidence on what the perfect dose is for each person in each condition.
No, of course.
That is actually safe for any drug. We do population averages, which I don't think is sustainable in the future. I think the future comes down to wearable technology, and we need personalized dosing for everything. Especially for things like hormetic stresses like exercise, cold, heat. The same amount of anything that is good for you, that is good today, might be harmful to the next person, but even to you, it might be harmful tomorrow, depending on what your chronic stress load is on that exact day.
Yeah, right? And I think this is an important thing because you're listening out there. Cold plunging and the cryotherapy I used to do actually made my condition and my health worse. I saw my numbers plummet. I love the infrared sauna. I added the cold plunging. It wasn't good for me. I saw my immunity drop. It wasn't good. So something that can be good in a small dosage and sometimes even in any dosage, because you've got so many other stresses, you're fasting, you're exercising, you're working, you're engaging in this world. There are lots of little stresses, hormetic stresses. Add another one, it can be just too much for the system.
Exactly, right? Because they compound. And in some cases, having one hormetic stress after another acts as a protective effect. In other cases, it compounds the stress and makes it worse. And that can change again for each person and each person every day, depending on what your current stress load and recovery is, right?
And I think this is so important, Alex. You got to emphasize this because people are just in cold plunging, they're doing infrared, they're doing fasting, they're doing this, and they think, oh, the research says it's good. But in what combination?
I'm gonna piss off a lot of my customers and a lot of the influencers who promote my technology. But my book, which is coming out within a week or so, it's a day or two away from finalizing. It's called Stress Hacked. There's two sides. There's the body and the mind. They start inverted from either end and they converge and they meet in the center. And kind of the underlying message is we cannot be strong unless we're strong in mind, body, and purpose, right? That if we're weak in one of them, where we're strong becomes weaponized. both internally and externally. And we need this unity of our mind, body, and purpose to use as a tool to lift not just ourselves, but those around us up in society. So I walk through the body side is how to keep your body strong, and I talk about different hormetic agents and how the right dose of stress is critical. But I make some comments in there that anyone who is saying that there is a single protocol on any one hormetic agent, let alone stacking 5, 10 of them in succession, that is good for all people all the time, is demonstrating they don't know the first thing about hormesis,
Yeah.
right? And how it affects the body. And it is now the prevailing narrative in influencers and even a lot of practitioners, right, talking in society. And it's terrifying, right? And like you said, like cold stresses you out, but infrared's good. I can deal with infrared. I can't deal with traditional saunas. I sometimes will faint within 10 to 15 minutes in a hot traditional sauna. My body is not built for the heat. I get heat stroke very, very easily. The cold, I have no problem. I have spent, in one instance, it was too much, but they said it was somewhere between 4 to 6 Celsius. I got on a phone call and I was in for over 30 minutes. And that's the only time I've ever actually felt a stress response from cold. I keep my office at 16 Celsius all day long, and I keep my bedroom at the same. And I'm in flip flops and shorts. Like my body deals well in cold. I do not get stressed out from the cold. I get extremely stressed out from the heat.
Yeah.
And we need to understand those. But you wouldn't tell a 20-year-old athlete to do the same workout that you tell a 80-year-old grandma, right? So why would you tell all people to do the same hormetic stacking every day, regardless of what their current health is and their recovery trajectories?
Exactly. But
It's
you
just
wouldn't tell
insane.
the 20-year-old athlete who's just got sick and had like a major virus. He's not going to do the same stack the next day. I mean, it doesn't sit well. So here's the same person, or he's not going to do it the same if he's in Canada or South Africa. There's changes, there's different sort of environments that affect our body in different ways.
100%, 100%. We're not the same person today as we were yesterday, nor will we be the same person tomorrow. We are constantly moving sphere of health, mindset, everything, right? And what we need to do to keep ourselves on track and healthy is going to be constantly changing. And that's why a big reason I believe wearable technology will help guide us in the future. It's not quite there yet. I follow my wearables as an adjusting after the fact. Okay, that didn't work. I think it's going to get to a place in the next decade where we can use it as an in the moment guide. What is this stress doing to us at this second, and be able to stop a session
Exactly.
when we're hitting the tipping point of when it transfers from beneficial adaptation to chronic stress, or harsh stress. But I can't answer your question. Sorry, I'm very tangential in nature, and the way I look at our bodies and also the world and the universe is everything is connected. So answering one question might lead me down 30 different
Sure.
rabbit
No,
holes
no, no
because it's
problem.
all
So I'm
intertwined.
bringing you
Um,
back from that tangent to go back to the conditions, because number one,
yeah.
joints,
So,
second, like metabolic and microbiome. But
yeah. So we have over 20 clinical trials to date. We have 2 US FDA standards, 21 validated structure function claims that range across metabolic health, brain health. We've shown beneficial effects in biomarkers associated with the aging process. We've shown improvements in gut health. We've shown improvements in athletic performance. Um, I am pretty devoted to research. We have more research projects in the works and underway than we have published. So right now with the hydrogen tablets, and to clarify, I'm not behind any particular brand. I'm the inventor of the technology. So I license my technology to 100+ different brands all over the world that use my tech to make their own hydrogen tablet, their own product. So behind my technology, we have more published research than every other commercial hydrogen water product combined, and we have more research underway than we have published. So this gap is just growing. And we also deliver by a large volume the highest concentration and dosage of any technology on the planet. So
Okay.
most of these other technologies are using our research to validate their technology, which is illegal and unethical and all these things. But I haven't really gone after them that much because I'm very forward movement mindset. When you're fighting like legally in a state of anger, you're preventing your forward movement.
Yeah.
So I'm more concerned about what I'm doing to propel everything forward than fighting other people, like ankle biters,
Yeah.
as I'll call them.
Okay, so is there opportunity? Do you work with physicists or chemists or labs? How do you license, that technology, your technology? Because I think bringing the tablets in with all the sort of health, legal and ethical rules and guidelines is so very difficult to get things registered. Is that the way forward to bring it to South Africa? Or let's talk about your inhale at this sort of stage at this time as well.
Yeah, yeah. So, with the tablets, we have our own lab in the US. We deal with universities all around the world. I've dealt with 20 something universities are currently dealing. Um, we manufacture in the US, but we've gotten approved in a number of countries around the world in addition to the US. Regulations, depending on where you are, can move really slow. It's bureaucracy, right? Usually it's just it is what it is.
Mm,
And the more complex a product is, and the more bureaucratic a country is, a lot of bureaucratic countries, they don't even require anyone to have any knowledge of science to be approving medicines and supplements and everything like
yeah.
that. They're following bureaucratic checklists, and if you don't fit boxes, it becomes very difficult. So we're struggling through that. Yeah, that is what it is. But in the
Mm,
Inhale H2 side, I'm really actually excited about this project. We're in pre-launch right now. We should be launching end of October, early November, for machines on the ground in a few key markets. It is a machine that I have been working on for 7 years with Dr. Tyler LeBaron, who is the preeminent leading researcher in the Western world, anyways, on molecular hydrogen. He runs the Molecular Hydrogen Institute in the US. Arguably the most knowledgeable biochemist in the world on the therapeutic effects of hydrogen in our body. Um, and 7+ years ago, when we started talking, and I looked at these machines in the market, and I just wanted his opinion. We were friends. We're much better friends now. Um, and I said, these machines, they're dangerous, right? They're going to explode on people, right? Because they're delivering like either hydroxy, 66% hydrogen, 33% oxygen, or pure H2, which is going to dilute around you. And I was also asking him about like minute ventilation, and they're not actually delivering these concentrations, they're diluting, you know? And so he's like, exactly right. And then started explaining to me that none of the clinical trials outside of now China approves these devices for their own use. They have just totally different standards for human safety. Um, None of the big multi-centers in Japan or Europe use any commercial devices. They're mixing precise doses of the gas and ensuring that every breath someone is taking is that precise concentration, right, of H2. And that's how the rodent studies work, everything. So there was no machine that could match that. These machines, they use a nasal cannula on a constant flow. Well, that's not how we breathe.
yeah.
So when you go and take a deep breath, the majority of the air you're getting is from your surroundings. It's not that nasal cannula. And the majority of the gas coming through that nasal cannula is just going back out your mouth into the air around you. So now we're seeing a rise from these machines, which are predominantly made in China, some in Korea, that there's explosions happening, fracturing people's faces, going back into people's lungs, burning their lungs. And this is exactly why no ethics board, no institutional review board anywhere outside of China is approving research on these machines because they're, even if it's a small risk, even if it's 1 in 1,000 people or even 1 in 100,000 people, that's too big of a risk
Yeah.
for hospitals and universities to take. And in my opinion, too big of an ethical risk for any business person to take. So we spent 7 years, we developed this system. It's a closed system. So we can adjust to zero point 0.1 degrees, anywhere from 1% up to 4%, which is below the explosive limit, which is what all the research has done, between 1 to 4%, for like a you know the fraction of inspired hydrogen. So basically every breath, and this is a concept that everyone knows about oxygen, that you have to measure the FiO2, but no one in hydrogen seems to be talking about this. Why would it be any different, right? So in our closed machine, we're filtering air from the inside. We're mixing it with the H2 that we're producing at precise concentrations. There's a bladder inside that fills to 3 liters. When you inhale, it's a face mask. It opens a one-way valve. 100% of the air you get is that precise concentration. And then you exhale, and all the CO2 goes out. So basically, that you are getting, for every breath, no matter how you breathe, whether you're breathing rapidly or slowly and deeply, every breath you get is that precise concentration that maybe matches this clinical trial or that clinical trial. So ours is the only machine where it is both safe, it's impossible to explode because we're below the explosive limit, but it's also the only one where you can guarantee that it's at the therapeutic levels used in the research. No matter how you breathe, you are getting that precise concentration to get to the precise elevation in H2 in the blood and your cells.
Sure. Okay. Well done. 7 years with some of the greatest, experts out there. Just we're coming to the end of the show. Can you summarize your top conditions, in terms of someone's listing out there and saying, listen, I've tried so many things. I've seen a functional medicine doc. I've done the IVs, supplements, I've done hyperbaric oxygen therapy, done the peptides. Is this something that I should try for my condition?
So what I'll say with hydrogen, it's not a cure for anything, just like exercise, but it is for everyone, right? Because it's something we evolved to anticipate, and it's something we're not getting anymore. And this is why hydrogen has shown to date to have potential effect in over 200 disease models across every organ, right? Because it's like an exercise, or a proper lifestyle intervention that helps you become healthy. So I don't want anyone to think of hydrogen as a magic cure to
Yeah.
any disease that they're having. It is an important ally to ensure your health gets better. And if you do have a chronic condition, it could potentially help you get back to where you want to be, help the other therapies that you're doing. That's actually a big area of our research that we're going down. It's one of the reasons I started this lab. We have, I think, 6 published and 7 or 8 more that are being written up or under peer review. We've been delivering various pharmaceuticals to rodents, with hydrogen and finding synergy. We're both improving effects in various disease models while reducing side effects. And that's an avenue I'm going down for the future as something called a functional excipient, where we show to have this effect with various drugs to both improve how they work in the body and also reduce the damage that they're doing, in this modulatory role. And, and any medical doctor worth their weight will tell people, like, if they go on a therapy, yeah, fix your diet, start, exercising, do all these things, you will respond better. Hydrogen is the same way. It is a lifestyle intervention, which has the likelihood of helping basically everyone to some extent,
Got you.
because it's likely that you're missing it.
So chronic diseases, and now no medical advice, off the record. You're a gambling man. Give me your top 3 conditions.
There's a paper that I'm an author on, so I'll speak away from the commercial side as the academic side. We with the hydrogen water, we have a paper on colorectal cancer in mice with 5-FU, a chemotherapeutic, and we showed to work synergistically with it. That was very interesting. I think, though, the biggest thing that we have clinical evidence for is metabolic health. People who are in metabolic syndrome, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, conditions like that, hydrogen seems to be a real mover that is helping these people get on track, right? That is a big one. Hydrogen inhalation may have a better effect for certain disease models of very specific organs because it'll get to higher level. But metabolic health, because of the gut interactions and ghrelin and GLP-1 and all these things, hydrogen water is what you probably want to go to for anything metabolic related.
Brilliant. Last question. Just give a message of hope to people. Chronic disease is just exponentially increasing. I've never seen it as a 26-year-old physician in terms of my career, and what should people be excited about? Because they've just been, been a very hard 5 years since COVID for a lot of people.
I think we are finally getting to a point where a lot of people in academia are extremely angry and disenfranchised with how the for-profit system works. I mean, I talk with professors all around the world. I find almost no pushback. Like I mentioned, I'm writing these articles and these books on the subject. I think we're at a point where we can say, listen, we've built in all this empirical evidence on our current pharmacological understanding of single receptor, single pathway, single molecule to adjust this dial that we think is empirical. Well, that's actually all based on a very small period of research that built the foundation and was actually directed by a known fraudster who bought the journals that started pushing this out in the very period where this theory took place. I think we're getting to a place where academics can say, what do we really know? Is everything we know based on some early deception and sleight of hand? And we can start using our same models, but deviating away from this private publishing and look at things holistically. Like we still need to look at things like statistical significance, but we can start doing better ratios. Like already we know that the ratio of like HDL to TC is more important than any single marker, or the ratio of HDL to triglycerides is more important. I think we need to start looking at formulas and ratios of whole panels, right? Like you look at something like exercise, everything is going to move in a certain direction towards proper function in a slight way, but exercise would never pass what constitutes a drug, right? Because it might not reach significance in a single marker to do a single thing, which is how all our regulations are built. So I think we're getting to the point where people are angry enough and enough people understand, even within academia, that there's something wrong here, there's something rotten, that we can start redefining what it means to have clinical significance. And by rejecting the private publishing model, which enforces consensus, and the consensus is built on editorial decisions, which have private interests. By doing all of this, I think we can utilize the data we have today, we can reanalyze it, and we can understand what's actually working to make people healthy and what's simply adjusting a single pathway or marker that potentially has deleterious downline effects without actually improving the chronic condition in question. So the only thing that's going to beat bad science is better science. And we need to get a lot of the private interests out of science to analyze things from a place of logic and rationality, not a place of us versus them, emotional war.
Yeah, brilliantly well said. And I think AI is going to be part of that. The technology is going to be part of that. So I'm pretty excited. Want to declare favor and blessing over you, Alex. You've got quite a story. You've made this from pain to purpose, and you're changing a lot of people's lives. A privilege to get to know you, and we'll chat offline because I think we need to get hydrogen on more shelves here in South Africa with the technology, because I think the technology is key here, because I think there are a lot of people out there selling things that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and the regulation, unfortunately, here in Africa is not where it should be. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks again for having me and allowing me to ramble on tangents.
Yeah, love your tangents and just love your mind. And I think we need more people that are willing to go in those tangents to discover things and to innovate in using a different pathway compared to the traditional way that things have been done. So well done.
Thank you.